Okay, so for those of you who are participating in this webinar for the first time, the topic we are going to talk about is Spring 3 MVC Basic 2. So far we have covered 7 topics in this course, and for MVC related topics, this is a second among the 7 topics that we are going to cover, and we have about 25 Spring topics in this course, and so today we are going to cover Spring 3 MVC Basics 2. Okay, so let's move on to the presentation. The topics we are going to cover in this presentation includes how to do some customization with the handler mapping, especially with Interceptor. And we'll look into how views can be resolved. So we are going to look into how some Spring provided view resolvers are used and how those resolvers in fact can be chained for selecting a resolver. And we'll spend maybe about 5 minutes talking about XML namespace. It has nothing to do with the Spring itself, but understanding namespace concept. For example, default namespace will help you to understand some Spring content configuration file. And then finally, we are going to look into this namespace, MVC namespace, and there are some configurations in this namespace. So let's move on to HandleAMapping customization. Before 2.5, if you have to, you have to specify your mapping information in the context file, web application context file. Now in Spring 2.5 and after, there is actually a class called the default annotation HandleAMapping. This is something that we actually used in our previous class, but it's actually being used as a default mapper. So you don't have to specify it. The only thing you have to specify is annotation driven, meaning so that you can use annotation, for example, @control annotation and @request mapping annotation that we have learned in previous session. Okay, so basically, the default annotation HandleAMapping searches for these annotations, and these annotations are used for specifying the mapping instead of XML file. Now, so when you use this annotation driven, this element in the context file, basically it registered this default annotation HandleAMapping class for you so that you don't have to declare it yourself in the context file. However, there are cases that in which you have to specify this you have to declare this default annotation HandleAMapping class in the context file. That is when you need to some customization of this HandleAMapping class. Now, what kind of customization are we talking about? So some of the customization you can do with this default annotation HandleAMapping class is interceptors. If you want to configure a set of interceptors, that is a customization. One of the customization, you can specify default handler. So this HandleAMapping does not resolve. Well, so if there is no HandleAMapping, is actually found. For example, if there is no controller and there is no handler method that handles the particular mapping, and you can specify default handler, and you can also specify order. So these are the customizations that you can do with default annotation HandleAMapping class. Okay, so let's move on with interceptor customization. So if you want to configure an interceptor or set of interceptors, you have to declare your default annotation HandleAMapping class like this, and then you are going to specify interceptors property with name of interceptors. So here we are configuring just one interceptor called myInterceptor. So if you don't have any interceptors to configure, then you don't have to specify these things, because it will be automatically configured as long as you use this element, MVC annotation driven. Okay. So what interceptors do? So the concept interceptors is really nothing new or nothing special in Spring Framework. It's actually being used in EJB or in the servlet. So basically interceptors are useful when you perform some specific functionality for certain request. So you will intercept incoming HTTP request and you can perform things like authentication, authorization, logging or XSLT transformation and things like that. So the way that you can implement Interceptor is you can implement handler interface, Java interface directly, or more likely you are going to extend handler interceptor adapter class. This is provided by Spring Framework. So this is utility adapter class in which through which you can just override these two methods. Pre-handler method and post-handler method. So this pre-handler method is the one that intercepts incoming HTTP request, and post-handler is intercepting outgoing HTTP response. Now, here you can return true or false Boolean value. If you return true, that means you are going to pass the request to another interceptor or the controller in the chain. If you return false, that means you're done with it and there is no more chaining. So basically, when you find a particular problem, for example, then you can just return false. That means it will return the response to the client and there is no more, chaining, meaning it will not pass the request to the next one in the chain, or your controller and handler and the controller will not receive that request. Okay, so let's see example code. Suppose I want to have logging interceptor. Here we are extending handler interceptor adapter class, and we are overriding pre-handle method and post-handle method. So here we are basically just performing the logging. And here we are also performing the logging as well. So, this is when request comes in, and this is when the response goes out. So here returning true, that means you're logging it and then you're passing it to the next interceptor or controller in the chain. So this is how you are going to configure your interceptor. Again, as we have talked about in previous slide, you are going to use the interceptor property of your default annotation HandleAMapping class. And here we are actually configuring two interceptors. Okay, but for the example that we just saw, we are configuring logging interceptor, and of course you have to declare that logging interceptor like this. Okay, so that object instance of logging interceptor gets created, then it will be configured to default annotation HandleAMapping object. Okay, so this is the second interceptor example. So again, we have extended handler interceptor adapter, and name of the interceptor is time-based access interceptor. So here we are overriding pre-handle method as we have done in previous slide. And here we can access some property values of this object. So this opening time and closing time are properties of time-based access interceptor object. So in this case, the way that we are going to declare this interceptor is, we can have a property of the bean. Okay, so now we have opening time property and closing time property of these the time-based interceptor. This is the one that we just saw in the previous slide, and then we can access these properties in the code, in the interceptor code, as we have seen in this slide. Okay, moving forward. All right, so let's run the first exercise in the hands-on lab, Basics Interceptor. So let's see the code. So we have two interceptors. One is a logging interceptor, and that is a code that we have seen. So logging interceptor extends handler interceptor adapter, and we are just displaying logging interceptor pre-handle entered, and this is post handle the method, and again we are just logging some information. Okay, and we're also returning true here, right? And elapsed time interceptor. So this is something that we have not seen the example in the slide. So in this case, what we are trying to do is we also do the logging, and also we are basically trying to compute the time that was spent for performing this request. So here we got the starting time in the incoming pre-handle method, and then we are saving that start time in the request scope object, okay, with the name of attribute name called the start time, okay. And in post handle, what we do is we are going to get the start time from the request scope object, and we remove it from the scope object first, and then we find the end time, so the time that this handle is being called, and here we are basically computing the duration. So we just subtract the start time from end time, and then we are saving that duration information into handler time, okay? So we are basically displaying this handler time in our view, okay? And in terms of configuration, let's see the configuration: src main web app and web inf. And so this is the configuration file, hello world servlet.xml file. So we have declared two interceptors. So these are the interceptor classes that we just have seen, right? Okay. And then we have a default annotation HandleAMapping class, and here we are configuring two interceptors. So these two interceptors are configured here. Okay. Another example here is order. So here we are basically saying that this handler, this handler is order 1. We'll talk about this order in a few minutes in the slide. Okay. So for now, just focus on configuration of these two interceptors. And let's run the application. Okay, so here, the duration is just 1 millisecond. Okay. The pages that we display is, I believe, is my page 1. So that is what gets displayed. Elapsed time and this handler time. This is the attribute that we have created in our interceptor class. Okay. All right, so that is interceptor. So let's move on. Okay, so there is a question from Arun. Okay, let me see if there are. Okay. If pre-handler returns false, will it call post-handler? No. What is the difference between interceptors and servlet filters? They are pretty much the same. Does framework recycle interceptor instances? Is thread safety an issue? It's just like the same issue with the servlet. Okay, so servlet is not thread safe, so you got to be careful about the thread safety for the servlet, and same thing with the interceptor. So same issue with the servlet, servlet filters. Okay, all right, moving forward. Resolving views. Let's see here. All handler methods, you know what? Actually, the first question you asked, if the pre-handler returns false, will it call post-handler? Actually, I'm not sure. It's something that we can actually try. If you have time, we'll try this one after this presentation. We can just return false and see whether we're actually seeing the logging message. Okay. Okay, so resolving views. All handler methods in SpringMVC controllers must resolve to a logical view name. So we have seen these examples in our previous sessions. So you can explicitly return the logical view name in the form of string or view object or model and view object. Okay, or implicitly. So again, we have seen an example of this one in our previous the presentation. So if you use void return, that means a URL. The last path of the URL will be used as a logical name. Okay, views in Springs are addressed by logical view name and are resolved by view resolver. So basically, Spring will go through a series of view resolvers configured in the context file until it finds a view resolver that can handle that logical view name. Okay, and Spring comes with a set of view resolvers. So let's see those view resolvers that come with the Spring framework. So these are the set of view resolvers. So we're going to actually mostly focus on these two, URL-based view resolver and internal resource view resolver, because these are the most commonly used view resolvers in your application. By the way, this internal view resolver, internal resource view resolver, is a subclass of this. Okay, and we'll see example of this too. And another important view resolver is content negotiating view resolver. This is in fact a special view resolver in the sense that it selects a view resolver and delegate the view resolution to a selected view resolver. So we'll discuss this content negotiating view resolver in detail in the topic of Spring 3 MVC REST. Okay, so when we discuss Spring MVC RESTful services, we are going to talk about content negotiating view resolver in detail. So again, we are going to mostly focus on these two. Okay, so URL-based view resolver. So this is the simple implementation of view resolver interface. In fact, every view resolver implementation is an implementation of view resolver interface. Okay, so URL-based view resolver is basically resolution of logical view name to the URL without explicit mapping definition. So a good example of this is this. Suppose return the view that is returned from the handler is test. Okay, so this is a logical view name. And then the view that gets selected is webinf/JSP and test.jsp. So this is selected when you have this configuration. So when you configure, when the URL-based view resolver is configured, okay, and basically you specify the prefix and suffix. So what it means is that this will be added to the logical view name, in this case test. So this is a prefix, and suffix is .jsp. So .jsp will be added to the test. Okay. So in this case, the view object, the view class that is used is the JSTL view class. Okay, so you probably have seen this example quite a bit. Okay, so whenever you have URL-based view resolver with this JSTL view class configured, then basically logical view name will be used to select a particular view. In this case, it will just use prefix and suffix. Okay, moving forward. Now, internal resource view resolver, as I said before, is a subclass of URL-based view resolver we just have seen in the previous slide. Okay, so in this case, it's assuming that it's using JSTL view or tiles view. So in that case, you don't have to specify this. You don't have to specify this property because it's assumed. Okay, so the only thing that you want to specify is basically the prefix value and suffix value. Okay, so again, you probably have seen this example quite a bit as well. So you've probably seen either internal resource view resolver configuration or the URL-based view resolver. In that case, you have to specify the view class property with JSTL view of view class. Okay, so another, the view resolver is resource bundle view resolver. In this case, you are going to specify the base name, and it says apology for this, strange, the font. When I create a PDF file, it just kind of did this, so I have to actually recreate it. Basically, you are going to create a properties file that take these views, in this case, a base name value, and then create a properties file. And then you have a class, and then you have the JSP file. Okay, so this is also available. So basically, you're using resource bundle the files to specify the view. Okay, so again, it's not that much popular. Okay, so moving forward, training view resolvers. So you can chain view resolvers by having multiple resolvers in your context configuration file. And if you want to specify the order of which one is kind of the selected first, meaning which view resolver will be actually seen as a possible view resolver, you can use order property. Okay. By the way, internal resource view resolver is automatically positioned as the last view resolver, unless it has its own order property. Okay. Okay, so if a specific view resolver does not result in a view, then Spring continues to inspect all the other resolvers until view is resolved. And if there is no view resolver that can handle the view, then it's a 404 error. So this is an example where we have two view resolvers. One is called XML view resolver, and the other one is called internal resource view resolver. Again, this is something that is as a default as a last resolver. So this is a way that you can specify order. So order value equals 1. So the first, the 1 is actually inspected first, and then order number 2 will be inspected next, and eventually, whatever. In this case, this one doesn't have any order value anyway, right? So this will be used last. Okay. Now, if this one is set to 2, and if this guy is set with order number 1, order value 1, then this will be, inspected first, and then it will be inspected next. Okay, so if this one has explicit order value, that will be honored. And if internal resource view resolver doesn't have a value, then it will be inspected the last. Okay, moving forward. Now, let's talk about views versus response bodies. So we have actually seen examples of these two in our previous sessions, and we'll see examples of this one more time. So there are two schemes for rendering response. So the one that we just talked about is usage of view and then view resolver. So basically, handler returns the logical view name, and that logical view name is used to create a view through a particular view resolver. Another scheme is usage of HTTP message converter, and these two schemes of rendering response are triggered in two different ways. Again, for view resolver and view, that is rendering a view by returning a logical view string, right? And for this guy is writing a message directly by returning response body or response entity. Okay. And the one, this, which one to use? This is basically, general guideline. So use view resolver and view for generating document for display in a browser. For example, HTML or PDF and, things like that. You want to use response body annotation to create the response directly to the client when you are basically responding to, let's say, web service client who wants to receive the response in the form of JSON or XML. Okay. All right, so let's see the demo. So let's see the code. So in this case, we are going to see two examples. One is the usage of the view, and the other one is usage of response body. Okay. So this is the example that we have seen so far. So basically we are returning a logical view string. So in this case, hello ID equals like 1, then it will return my page 1. So my page 1 is used to select the view. In this case, it will select my page 1.jsp file. So this is something that we have seen. So this is usage of, this is a scheme of creating a response through the logical view name, and in return we'll create a view object, and then through the view resolver, the particular view will be selected. This is a case that we are creating a response directly. So here there is no view resolver involved. So here